Welcome back to Other People's Lives. I'm Joe Santagato.
I'm Greg Dybeck.
And if you are just listening to the show, you can now watch it on YouTube. It is available there at youtube.com/otherpeopleslives.
Yes, and today we are speaking with Scott, is it Violet? How do you say the last name?
Villette.
Scott Villette of Blue Mountain Bigfoot Research. So to kick things off, can you just explain to us what your organization does exactly?
Actually, we are a scientific organization that is out to classify and register the American primate that's walking in the woods today. Yep.
So American primate, meaning, I guess, what most people would refer to as Bigfoot, Sasquatch.
Yes.
Cool. So how long have you been doing this? And I guess what made you, essentially dedicate your life to tracking this?
All right. Well, I actually, what got me into this was I have a degree in anthropology, and my expertise is in Native American culture. And what got me into it was I've worked with Native American tribes from all over the United States, but particularly I spent a few years with the Miwok tribe in Central California, and they're in the Yosemite Valley area. And I started looking at pictographs and petroglyphs that they had in their area, and there was one that I didn't recognize because I learned how to read them in college, but I was looking at this one and I go, what is this? And they said, well, that's Yayali in their language. And I said, what's that in our language? And they go, well, it's Bigfoot, hairy man. And I'm like, oh, okay, so that's real. And they said, yes, absolutely, that's real. And the pictograph I was looking at was like 500 years old, and we started finding other ones that were like 1,500 years old that were um, pictographs of Bigfoot. And I started researching with other tribes, and I walked over 175 different uh, native tribes that have Bigfoot legends. And I said, well, they got to be something to this. So I started looking into the Bigfoot thing about 25 years ago and started finding stories from other people. And when I launched my website and I got a Facebook page and I got logos all over my truck and people started sharing stories with me, I started correlating the Native American stories with the modern day stories, and they were matching up. So I thought, well, there's got to be something to this. This legend's got to be real. So 2 years ago, I actually saw one in the woods for the first time.
Yes, so
After
you saw a Bigfoot.
yeah, after 25 years of looking. So uh, they're pretty elusive, but yeah, I saw one 2 years ago.
Where were you, and like what did it look like? Because I know, like, I mean, I am not that familiar with Bigfoot, but I know that the legend is that it's tall, like 7-8 feet tall or something like that, and walks like a human but looks like a primate. So what was? Can you just like describe this entire encounter and where it was?
Okay, yeah, we were in the Blue Mountains in eastern Oregon, and in the Wallowa Whitman National Forest. What led me to it was I received several, like 15 reports from people all within a 2 week period, and I'm like, oh, okay, so that's probably where they're at right now. So we trucked up in the woods and spent every day there for 3 or 4 days. And then I was hiking along a trail and we smelt this really bad smell, which I have heard described to me, but I've never smelt it before. But a lot of people who have Bigfoot encounters describe how bad they smell. So I, I had my partner that was with me. I said, okay, let's just keep walking on this muddy trail and maybe it'll follow us and we can get footprint tracks, because it was dense forest. There was no way just, to find it. Um, but so we hiked a little ways, um, and the smell went away. So we turned around, went back, and when we got back to when the smell was really bad again, I heard this kind of a grunt roar sound in the woods, and uh, give us a general direction, but I still didn't see it. So I growled at it again. I growled back at it, and it growled at me again. And that's when I located it. It was about 200 feet away, and I saw its head and shoulders um, through an opening in the trees, and it was bobbing its head back and forth a little bit. kind of looking at them from side to side, kind of like a primate does. Like some animals do. When they're actually kind to range you by doing that. So I started snapping pictures of it, and then we heard a whistle off in the woods to our right, and it turned and walked away. Um, then we spent like 3 days there measuring everything, trying to figure out how far away it was, where it was standing. And where it was standing, we found three 9-inch footprints with three 15-inch footprints next to them. So the one we saw was 6 foot tall after measuring everything. Um, the one that whistled at this one off in the woods is probably mom or dad, and that was the 15-inch footprints telling the juvenile to walk away. Um, so what it looked like to me was surprisingly more human than I thought. Um, it had a really familiar human looking face. It was less primate ape, it was more primate hominid like us, looking at me. So that got me to thinking about what the species might be.
What did you feel in that moment? You said that you've essentially been tracking Bigfoot for 25 years and then you have that experience.
Oh, I was elated. I mean, I just kind of sat there in shock for about an hour after it walked away before we did anything else. We were like, oh my gosh, did we just see what we just saw? Trying to convince myself it was real. But yeah, I was shocked. I mean, like after being in pursuit of this thing for 25 years, and I've had, you know, what you would say close encounters with them. I've had rocks thrown at me before. I've had uh, trees pulled out of the ground and laid next to my tent in the middle of the night. We found footprints and stuff like this. It was the first time I ever saw one eye to eye, and it was, I was elated. I was like, oh my gosh, they are real. I wasn't just thinking of this in my head.
What did the footprints look like?
They're surprisingly different than humans. And I've been studying the footprint casts for a long time, and I've got to spend some time with some of the more prominent experts in the field today. Like Dr. Jeff Meldrum from Idaho State University, and he explained a lot of stuff to me about the footprints, and being an anthropologist and knowing how the bone structure of a human works. If you look at the footprint casts, they are similar to humans, but there are some distinct differences in them. First of all, they're 4, 5, 6 inches wide, depending on how long they are. They have a really broad, wide heel, and and on average, they're 14, 15 to 16 inches long. They have seen some that are up to 20. So
Wow.
that would put that creature over 10 foot tall. But
Jesus.
That's enormous.
yeah,
But like this is,
but
but like like if something's 10 feet tall, how can we miss these things? And why, if they're so elusive, how over the years, because I mean I'm 28 years old, but even when I was younger, I even knew about Bigfoot and like all these things, and throughout all this time, like we can't find, pictures of them you know, or anything. Like it's how are they that elusive if like it's just all this time, and you were able to see them. Like, how can we not have, gotten these like clear pictures or video of these things and confirmation? Like, why do you think they're so elusive? Do you know?
yeah, I do, and I have a theory on that. Um, and what it is, it's kind of there's kind of two or three factors in this. There is, first of all, the factor of numbers. So in Malawi Whitman National Forest, where I live, I went to the Forest Service and I asked them how many animals are in the woods. Well, they told me that in the about 15,000 square miles that this forest is, which is a huge area, you know, um, they have about 10,000 deer. So I see deer all the time. They have about 8,000 elk. I see elk quite often. They said they have, about 1,000 to 1,200 bears. I see a bear about every other year. And then they say they had 800 cougars. Well, I have never seen a cougar in the woods. I'm sure cougars probably saw me, but I've never saw one in the woods. But if there's only 100 of these Bigfoot in 15,000 square miles, what's the chance of me ever running across one? And if they're in this as intelligent as I think they are, if they're like humanoid intelligent, I mean, not tool making intelligent, but just, you know, tribal human, intelligent, they've learned over the years how to avoid humans because we're the biggest predators in the woods. And another thing about that is we do have pictures of them all the time. But nobody believes you. I find footprints about once a year. I've got my pictures that I put up, 2 years ago, and like the Roger Patterson film in 1967, that was before any digital anything, and that one is very convincing. Um, so we do have these, but people just, and like I said, I get 120 reports a year just in my area of people who do see them, whether they're hunters or guys out fishing, people out picking mushrooms or berries in the fall, you know. So we do get a lot of reports. The problem is nobody believes them. That it doesn't get picked up by the headline news, and just us researchers get these stories all the time, and people do see them all the time.
Like if
And
you
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, if Nat Geo were to send out, like, here's our best photographers, we're dedicating a year or two, to this search. Like, do you think there would be that type of high quality footage that would come out? It's just that people aren't putting in the effort to get that.
Right, and like that's well, you're correct. I mean, if Nat Geo, they would have to put up a lot of money to do that, because, like I said, it took me 25 years to track one down. So if they had a guy in the woods for 25 years, so that would cost them a lot of money and a lot of time, and a lot of these big corporations just don't do that. They'd rather spend their money on taking pictures of tigers in Africa, or not lions in Africa.
Right.
I got
What about
tigers.
I don't know how this works with other animals, but things like finding a dead body or finding the bones of animal. I don't know if that's something common or if that's something that's ever been discovered with Bigfoot.
It hasn't been discovered with Bigfoot, and there's another probability of why that hasn't happened. Um, there's a few things people don't realize in the woods, especially up in the Pacific Northwest. It is, I mean, the ground has a lot of acid in it, and it's wet all the time. It's not very conducive to preserving bones. That's why you find dinosaurs in deserts, but you don't find them in forests. Um, and another thing with this is a lot of people don't know porcupines. Their main diet is is bones. They eat bones. That's what they eat because they have to build the calcium for those little spikes that they wear on the back of on their backs. But what's interesting is there was an anthropologist in Washington State University. He's passed away now, but his name was Grover Krantz, and he put up $25,000 for anybody who could bring him the carcass or the bones of a bear that died naturally in the woods.
Of just a bear.
Just a bear, and nobody's ever been able to do it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
So where do they like? So what is the answer to that? If like the bears aren't dying from natural causes, when they do die, what happens to their remains?
It's just like everything else in the woods. I mean, you got the predation, from, you know, even other bears eating them, coyotes, wolves. Up here in the Northwest, we have wolves, um, and then, well, cougars and all the meat eaters. They take care of the big portion of it. Then bugs take care of the rest, and and then the porcupines eat the bones. So I have found piles of elk fur, but that's the only thing is left is the elk fur. There's nothing left. There's no bones. There's nothing. So we find that quite often, actually.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess from your experience, the research, what is your theory in terms of you? I think you said before the northern ape or northern primate. What to you is it? How many of these do you think there are? Are these like primates that travel in packs? Is this a hybrid between a man and an animal? I guess what's your kind of breakdown of what Bigfoot is
Okay.
as a tribe?
Okay. Here's my theory, and there's a few other people who have the same theory I do. Um, is First of all, I think there's about probably 2,500 of them between up in the Pacific Northwest, between Northern California up in Washington, but these things are all over the world. I mean, we find them in Nepal and even in Australia and Vietnam, and there's China, Russia. These places, these things are all over the world. Um, what I think they are is the difference between a primate ape like a gorilla and a primate hominid species like us is that we walk upright and we have small canine teeth. Primates, apes they walk on all fours and they have very large canine teeth. The one I saw and the pictures I've saw and descriptions over, hundreds and hundreds of descriptions I've got, everybody says that these things have small canine teeth, they look very human, and they walk upright. So technically and scientifically, these things are human. They At any given time in the history of humans, we've had 4 to 5 species of humans living on the planet at the same time. That whole evolutionary curve, that T-shirt you see with the monkey that turns into the guy,
Yeah.
that's not how it worked. That's bunk. The way it worked was there's a common ancestor somewhere, like up at the top of the waterfall. But as the water comes down over the waterfall, the water spreads out. And as you go in, as different species of humans went to different areas on the planet, they adapted differently to survive in that area. So that's why we have different, looking humans. You've got black people, white people, red people, yellow people. So they developed in different regions for different, you know, um, oh God, what's the word I'm looking for? They had different things they had to adapt to survive, and their bodies changed to do that over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So what happened with the human species as they spread out? We've had like Homo heidelbergensis, Homo nadali, Homo floresiensis, Homo neanderthal, and Homo sapien, us, all lived together at the same time. And we know what happened to Homo neanderthal because they were in France and Europe area. When our species Homo sapien got there, we bred them out. 4% of all Europeans, or I meant all Europeans, pretty much have 3 to 4% of Neanderthal DNA in them. So why is today any different? I don't think it is. I think there's another species of humans still living on this planet. They just avoid us like a plague. And so that's what I think they are. I don't think they're an ape. I think they're an actual another split off the human genome somewhere who has survived over, all the extinctions, just like we
Yeah.
have.
It makes me think of even like indigenous tribes of like the Amazon that haven't even been discovered yet, but have kind of their own civilization out there.
Exactly. So I think Bigfoot falls in that category.
Wow.
Do we know what they eat, or like, I assume that there should be some sort of evidence of like animals with bite marks or scratch marks or something, or you know I don't know, is there anything, do you know anything about what they eat, what their diet is like?
Oh, absolutely. There's a couple things about them and what they eat, and I have experienced this personally. Actually, um, we have a lot of reports of them chasing down deer. When you're 10 foot tall and you have a 6 foot stride length, it doesn't take many steps for you to go a long ways. So they're pretty fast creatures. They really are. Um, and so they do eat meat. They do eat animals. We have found deer in trees with no bite marks, no scratches, no bullet holes, no nothing. These things are laying across branches sideways in trees 8 foot up with their necks broke, like something grabbed it and broke its neck. Um, that is found surprisingly a lot. I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 cases of that found a year around the nation, um, of deer being stored in trees like a meat locker. Um, and then another thing is, if the Patterson film, which is probably the best video of a Bigfoot we have ever got, um, if you take the measurements of this creature, it has a very long torso. I mean, because they're tall, but they're longer than us. Their torso is longer than ours on average. Um, the average human, your torso fits within this measurement, and so their average is longer than ours. So that means they have more intestines than we do. They have a longer digestive tract than we do. So they can eat stuff like lichen out of trees. They can eat vegetation that we can't get nutrients out, but they can because they have a longer digestive tract. So I'm figuring they're like us. They're omnivores. They eat meat and vegetation, and their bodies just process rougher food than ours, so it's easier for them to survive.
And you're talking about, you mentioned Roger Patterson. I just looked that up. So that, it looks like it was 1967. It was, what was that kind of footage, like some of the most clear footage, I guess, that was released to date?
It is. It's the clearest footage we've got to date. And the neat thing about that, it was taken on an old time film camera that had to be developed. So there's nothing digital about that at all, taken in 1967.
Okay, I've seen these photos. I'm looking it up now. It's extremely clear. It's basically a giant ape human man walking upright, kind of turning and looking at the camera.
Yeah, that's it. And there's something interesting about that whole thing. Is one, if you watch how it walks, it does not walk like a human. Um, it has what is known as a compliant gait, because if you notice, it kind of walks hunched over. It never locks its knees. Humans, when we walk, we lock our knees. We hit our heel on the ground. We lock our knees. We vault over our hips. That's why we bounce when we walk. That creature doesn't bounce at all. And there's a couple reasons for it. One, the way it walks, hunched over and not locking its knees. Two, we've discovered that their foot flexes in the middle, so their foot bends in the middle, and they have what they call a mid-tarsal break, and that is because they have no arch in their foot. If we didn't have an arch in our foot would bend in the middle too. So if you watch that film, as they walk, as soon as the toe comes off the ground, the the foot is vertical to the ground. People don't walk kicking their heel on the bottom of their foot straight up and down every time they take a step. So, and then if you were to measure the length of the legs, the length, from the hip to the knee, and from the knee to the ankle, and the length of the arms compared to the shoulder width and stuff like that, we get back into those averages. It doesn't match any human averages. In fact, the length of the torso of that and the length of the legs compared to the arms, we can't you can't put a human in that suit. There's no way, because there's some things, if you put a man in a suit, you can't change the length of the bone of his hip to his knee. You can't lengthen that or shorten it, according to the averages. So that's what's really convincing about that film is one, it was taken before you could digitally alter anything, and two, that creature's 7 foot 6 inches tall. Because that's something Nat Geographic did do. They took that film and diagnosed it. They went to that area and took laser scanners and scanned the whole terrain, exactly where that was taken. And they took the focal length and from the camera and did all the math, and they figured that they could measure everything that was taken in that film. And that creature was 7 foot 6 inch hunched over. If it stood up straight, it was probably a little taller. But they broke that down and said, yeah, there's no way you could put a human in that suit. If it was, there's no way it fit.
And for anyone listening, if you want to check this out now, it's Patterson-Gimlin, Gimlin film. But quick search, it'll definitely come up.
Yep.
Do you have a theory as to why a company like Nat Geo won't go out of their way to find this footage? Because I assume that this would be one of the biggest stories. Like if it were to come out that there was definitive footage that they caught on these 4K cameras that we have nowadays and very clear. Like, is there a theory as to why they won't do that? To me, it just seems like it would be to their benefit to find this.
Well, actually, they have. I mean, they have. There's shows that come out all the time and documentaries. There's probably 2 or 3 a year that come out about the search for Bigfoot. But the problem is they take those 4K cameras and they take all their equipment and they go into the woods for a weekend, or they go into the woods for a week or a month at the most. And without any, research or stories like I got, like I said, it took me 25 years to find one. And then the only reason I did that is because I had a whole lot of people give me information all within a few days. That was where I was able to narrow down where this creature was going to be. And if these things are migratory in any way, going into the woods for a weekend or a week or 2 weeks to shoot, because shooting documentaries is very expensive. So, it'll cost them, $100,000 or $200,000 a week to put those crews in the woods, and they're not going to spend any more than that. So it's going to be highly unlikely that they ever find anything.
When you meet people and tell them what you do for a living, what's the reaction that you normally get?
I do get the scoffs and the laughs and the chuckles a lot, but there is a large community of people out here who, and I hate using the word believe, because I'd rather leave belief up to religion. To me, I'm more of a scientist, like, because I'm an anthropologist. That's what I do, is science. So there are the chucklers and stuff like that, but I think after I sit down and explain to them the science behind what we have discovered over the last 100 years, from other people been doing this for a long time, and taking all those little points of data and putting them together, it's fairly convincing to a lot of people. They're like, oh, that makes sense. But you still get the people who are like, oh yeah, you're an idiot. But I just chuckle and go on and let the trolls alone, basically.
No, but I think it's the reason, we want to speak with you, because, people are going to believe or they're not going to believe. But it seems like for you, it's not just this like romanticized belief or something that you want to believe, but from, I guess, a scientific approach, you just feel that there's a lot more evidence leaning towards the existence, plus your own experiences.
Yeah, exactly. And I tell people that a lot. It's not that I believe; it's that I have studied the evidence and found it credible. Um, so for me, it's more of a scientific experiment, and than it ever was. Just, oh, I'm going to go find some mystery thing. Um, it's like I've got all this evidence that's right in my face saying this thing is here. This is real. This has got to be because um, case in point, here's something that nobody that a lot of people don't know about is uh, gosh, dates are I think it's 1990s sometime, but don't quote me on that. Uh, there was a set of footprints found up in Bosburg, Washington, which is kind of the center of the state up by the Canadian border. There was these footprints found, and one of the 2 feet, they were 15-inch tracks found in snow. Um, one of the feet was deformed, and if you were to take that foot and draw out the bone structure in it, it makes sense. The deformity makes sense because if you took the drawing of those bones and showed it to a podiatrist and they look at it, they say that's clubfoot. That's a natural human problem. So if this footprint was faked, it was faked by a podiatrist. And if it was faked 180 or no 1087 times because we found 1087 of these footprints. And the foot was flexible. So, as it stepped on different substrates, it made different shapes, but it was the same foot. So we found a Bigfoot that had a human problem. So if somebody's going to fake that, they had to be very intelligent and like I said, they had to be a podiatrist or a doctor. And in 1990, I don't think they had the technology to make that happen.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never heard that because I know that there have been hoaxes uncovered. I know there was what's his name? I had it here. Oh, Ray Wallace. I know he. Yeah, so I'm sure obviously that kind of affects the credibility of a lot of this in people's minds. But I guess he was kind of planting footprints and then said, at the time of his death that he was just kidding and he made it up. But something like what you just said is, definitely interesting, where it would be a lot more difficult or take a lot more time to make a hoax out of something, like you said, with the clubfoot.
Yeah, exactly. And then what's really interesting to me anyway is as an anthropologist, I know the shape of the foot, I know the bone structure of the foot, I can name every metatarsal on that foot. But so when I see footprints, it doesn't take me very long to look at them and say that's fake or that's real. Just by the shape of the foot and the way it's impacted the ground. Um, there's several of us out here that know the secrets. So it doesn't. Do I get hoaxed? I get hoaxed. I Well, people try to hoax me all the time, and there are even some big footprints that I looked at and said, that's got to be real. But you know what? I'm gonna chuck this in the hoax pile because I have to. Only ones that I could sit down and say, okay, this is it. We've got footprints. We've got footprints with dermal ridges in them, in the toes. The fingerprints in the toes that don't match humans. Uh, in fact, it's an unknown primate type pattern that was even looked at by fingerprint experts with the police force, and they said that is not a human fingerprint. So if you were to fake this footprint, how did you carve fingerprints into a piece of wood? That fine and that detailed. It's kind of hard to do. So
So with what you're currently doing and studying, what is your end goal? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Like, are you trying to just study as much as you can about this species, or are you trying to kind of bring light to it and hopefully like convince everyone?
well, I don't know if it's a matter of convincing. What I wanted to do is just get it recognized by the scientific community, which is kind of hard to do for twofold. One, we were just talking about the hoaxing. That's another reason mainstream science probably won't touch this because it's very hard to. The mainstream scientific community works on, funding from the public or grants, and you don't get grants if you can't prove what you're going to prove, you know. So with all the hoaxing and stuff that goes on, I don't think any of the mainstream people will ever try to go out and prove this. I think what's very exciting today is DNA. I think that's what's going to put this over the edge. Because right now there's a real promising new technique that's coming out where it's called environmental DNA, where they can take, a cup of water out of a pond and tell you every creature that ever drank from that pond. So um, hopefully when we get enough of these unknown primate DNA strains and being able to put them together, I think we have over 100 now of DNA from that's unknown primate that match each other, don't match anything else on the planet. We can start convincing mainstream science that here we got proof, we got DNA right here. Look at this, you know.
Hmm.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I mean it's just something to keep up to date with, I guess. There's always going to be new information out there, new sightings, new potential evidence. But this was really cool. I think your scientific approach to this is interesting, and it was really great to talk to you. And as two people who really know absolutely nothing about this, it's definitely eye opening.
Well, thank you.
Awesome.
Is there somewhere where people can go and get more information?
Yeah, we have a website. It's squatchoregon.com. And I also have a YouTube channel called Blue Mountain Bigfoot Research, and that's where we post all our findings. We do little series on everything we find, and we do documentaries about some of the stories we get. And on our website, it's going to be changing pretty soon. We're going to start adding more information on there. But right now, we're working on a whole new project where we're going to uh, I'm actually in Maine right now, and we're going to travel back across the United States from back to Oregon later. But what we're trying to do is collect as many stories from people who haven't come forward before, and we're going to do a massive database of all these stories so we can start uh, diagnosing these creatures' habits. And from each little story, we'll have a bit of the puzzle, so we can start, figuring out their family life, their eating habits, their travel habits, and we can do that with just stories we get from people. And that's our next project that we're going to be working on, a massive story database. So
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming on and taking the time and informing us about all of this. I'm definitely gonna look into it because I'm super interested now.
All right, thank you. All right,
thanks. Have a good one.
All right, bye-bye.
I gotta say that I came into this a full on like fucking skeptic, but part of me now, he's like convinced part of me. Has he not convinced you?
I mean,
because what he's saying makes a lot of sense. Because dude, listen, if you look up, like no one in their right mind like doubts the existence of Neanderthals, right?
Yes.
So, but if you Google what they looked like, it's not that far off.
I mean, people definitely do doubt it, but yeah.
Of what, Neanderthals?
Well, I mean, religion's another topic.
Oh, well, yeah. But I'm saying, like, there's not a lot of people who are just like, whatever. Bigfoot just seems to, like, everyone just jumped on the fad of being like, bullshit. But why not?
The bare bones thing of, like, no one's been able to, and I think I have heard that before, like, no one's been able to collect the bones of a bear. And I do understand that it's not common to see certain animals kind of in their natural habitat, obviously, but I mean, for me, we've still seen these animals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like that's the only thing that's like, I get that they're elusive, but bro, we've seen hummingbirds. Like, they're the fastest fucking bird. Like,
yeah, I mean, I guess the argument here of
or like certain species
more man
of ants
than animal makes them more elusive, but
I don't know, man. Like, that's the part that's like hard for me. Like, it makes a lot of sense what he's saying, and I'm not saying that it's bullshit or anything like that at all, because it makes sense. Like, I do believe in his his not theory, but like what he was saying, where there was like a bunch of different species of humans living on the earth at the same time. Yeah, I believe that. I think that is that makes a lot of sense to me. So the fact that one of these is kind of like, and we all, I mean, if you stare at a gorilla, you're like, I'm staring at, there's a person in there, you know? like if you stare at a gorilla, you're like, it's very close. So why can't there be an even closer, like, thing that bridges that gap? So, like, that just makes sense to me. I don't think it's, like, wild to assume. If you told me that they hovered above the ground and flew, then that I would be harder to believe. But just to believe that they walk upright, it's like, I don't know. But the fact that we don't see them, that it just, I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that.
Also, hunting. I mean, for no one to have seen and killed one of these also.
Yeah.
Throughout the history of the world is a little hard to believe. I mean, there's just so much about this that is just this mythical legend that has just been passed down from, drawings on the cave wall to...
But there's deers hanging in the trees. Explain that.
I mean, that's why it's such a good, I guess if you want to call it conspiracy theory, because there's
these weird things,
not mounting evidence on either side necessarily, or things that you can't explain. It's fun. Like, I want them to exist. I'll tell you that.
Dude, if I saw a 10-foot fucking Bigfoot, I'd be like, bro, maybe they're procreating and hiding, and then they're just gonna run rampant on Oregon and just take over.
Real Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, exactly.
Planet of the human apes.
Yeah.
I'd be terrified.
Oh,
though
God.
we have guns, so
yeah,
there's that. But
yeah, we would have to do that.
But if they figure out how to use guns,
we are so fucked.
What I do know is that Scott, who we just spoke to, does believe, obviously.
Yes.
I mean, he's taking an anthropological approach. He feels the evidence speaks for itself. And I'm almost just glad that there's people like him dedicating all their time to this research. Like, just give us more evidence. I'm open. I'm ready for it.
Yeah, I mean,
there's a lot to look up. I don't know enough, but even just doing like searches in the conversation, apparently like the FBI investigated Bigfoot once, and I'm going to be doing a lot of reading.
I think that in the past, I guess I was just dismissive about it, just because I learned about it when I was young, and when you're young, it's easy to be like, bullshit, and it's like easier to just do that, and I just haven't thought about it since then. So now I'm just kind of like, yeah, why not? Why can't they exist? Like, I don't, like, I get it. And, like, the only part that makes it hard to believe is the fact that, like, we're not going to see these fucking things. Like, even if he thinks there's 2,000 of them, like, bro, come on. If you found one, like, let's just say over the course of whatever, like, this one particular man was able to find one. Like, no one else has been able to find one.
Yeah.
And, like, get this shit in, like, the recent time, and, like,
not one of these things wandered into like, a town one day. Like, that's the other thing. I mean, okay, I understand the elusiveness, the intelligence, but I don't know. This is going to sound weird, but is there like mental illness involved with them too? Like, can there, like, they get club feet. Like, can there just be one that doesn't know what's going on and it's just like wandering?
That's true.
Where he shouldn't.
That's true.
I don't know. I will say, I'm down for it. Bring me evidence. All right, I won't write it off completely, but
I will. Bigfoot.
I would believe in aliens much sooner than Bigfoot.
See, and like that even doesn't make sense.
I mean,
to me
I do
now.
believe in aliens.
I believe in aliens
what doesn't?
too. But
so what doesn't make sense?
To believe in something that we haven't seen and that's been like, whatever, and blah blah blah, and it's like it's out there and they can fly and they're invisible and they can do mind control, and like there's all these things about aliens. But with Bigfoot, it's just like it's just an ape that walks upright. We're like, get the fuck out of here. But
I know, but
it's
isn't
easier
it
to believe aliens?
But it is easier to believe because of everything you just named. It's harder to believe that there's just a ape human walking around that we haven't seen. It's much easier to believe that there's superior technology and an advanced species that we haven't caught up to yet to find.
I don't know.
This is why these things are theories. Like we're not going to know.
Like, we don't question aliens because we're like, oh, it has to be because it's outside of our, education and in whatever, blah, blah, blah. But this is like kind of easy to understand. I don't know.
Should we take a trip?
I think we're going to Oregon, baby.
Let's go.
We're going to Oregon, baby.
It's cool. It gives you something to think about. And he was cool. He was the right person to speak to about that too, I think. It's not like, he's not necessarily a fanatic of Bigfoot. He's
Right.
like, he wasn't like a fan. He was just like a scientist.
Yes, exactly. And that's why I like that as well. I'll tell you what, this is going to be my next talking point the next time I get drunk with some friends and being like, you guys believe in Bigfoot? And then just see where it goes.
And then you sneak in that evidence that and see how they
I'd be
react.
like, you can't find the remains of a bear either, though.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, hey, if anyone out there has Bigfoot encounters of their own, shoot us an email. We'd love to read it.
Yeah, we definitely want to hear that. Also, if you have anything that you think fits for the show, don't hesitate to hit us up. Go to oplshow.com/contact. Send us an email. We go through all of them. And if it works, then we will schedule something out.
Yep. And follow us on Instagram at OPL Podcast. We put up the clips of the show there. YouTube.com/Other People's Lives. If you want to see the video version of these, if you want to see our faces while we have these conversations. And you can support the show also by going to patreon.com/OPL show, where you get bonus episodes, follow-ups with guests. We answer questions that you guys send in. So lots of good stuff there. And that is all.
Yep. And that is all. We'll see you guys next time.